Thanks, Kevin. So there's a lot of slides here. Some I'll go through fairly quickly. They've just got some words on them. All right. So update on regarding the corridor planning process, the outline of the relicensing decision and review of design concepts from the charrette that we held a couple weeks ago. So just a little background, we started this project, or you guys started this project actually quite a while ago in 2013. So these are just some key dates of kind of what has been driving the planning process. And, we got hired back in July of 2016, did the big community kickoff meeting just about a year ago. I think a lot of people from the community were there. We did a lot of technical talks over the summer, getting people on the same page, and so we could all kind of understand some of the technical issues. And then last month, we ran this planning charrette for about 4 days over at the library. The next thing that's going to be coming up, as Kevin says, is there's continued meetings with the Kinni committee and basically the meetings with all of you and the February big decision, right? And then moving into 2018 is really kind of pulling the draft corridor plan together. And the particulars of that will be driven by somewhat by the relicensing decision. So objectives for this project were to develop an understanding of how the community relates to the river. So this is a longer-term planning project that really looks at about a half a mile either side of the river. So it's not just about the river, but about the community and its relationship to the river and vice versa, right? So, we've been working to educate people and get educated ourselves to facilitate this relicensing decision and conversations, and really to kind of look at this implementation strategy as sort of the end product of the plan. So there's been this 11-person committee. Some of them are here tonight. Adam sits on that same committee that we've been meeting with monthly, sometimes twice a month. A lot of these technical studies that have been done. We're working on planning level cost estimates, which are being developed for each of the 3 scenarios, and be formulating recommendations as Kevin was talking about moving forward. So in October, the council said, here are the 3 things that they think, need to be really studied and decided upon, right? It's relicense both facilities and keep moving forward the way you have been. Or surrender the existing license and remove both of the facilities, or relicense and keep the Junction Falls facility on the, by Lake George, and remove the Powell Falls facility and open up the lower half of the river. Again, deadline to do that. License information from August. Got till 2023 to really put a stake in the ground.
That really is a 5-year process, too. And we'll have to start that 5-year process. As soon as the City Council makes a decision in February, we will begin either relicensing or surrendering licensing shortly thereafter. So it'll take us 6 good months to get our initial installation in August of 2018.
So yeah, things aren't going to happen overnight, but obviously decisions have to be made fairly quickly in order for the 5-year process to know what it's doing. For the charrette process, we developed a set of corridor guiding principles, if you will, that kind of help us and help the committee and the rest of the community understand how to kind of evaluate a bunch of the ideas that were developed and that are being looked at. So these are those 10 planning principles. I won't go into detail because you've had them in front of you, but they all kind of build around this idea of strengthening and supporting the Kinni corridors, heritage, social, environmental, educational, ecological, economic development, resiliency, public health, and really about continuing to keep engaging each other, right? So we developed a series of scenarios during the charrette with input from everybody. The point of this process was really to coalesce as many people as we could to have these conversations, to have a design team here that could illustrate these ideas, to kind of set forth what the possibilities were. This was not about making a recommendation for a design, but to help people kind of envision, if the dams stay, if the dams go, if one dam stays and the other one goes, what might that mean? How might that play out along the corridor? And there's a number of things we all looked at and the people were interested in that really aren't tied either way to whether or not a dam might stay or a dam might go. Some of those things that you can sort of see on some of these plans. So we looked at the upper and kind of lower. We divided the corridor kind of in two pieces, right? Because it's fairly long. So, where might redevelopment sites occur? So you can see on this plan some ideas for potential redevelopment on the north end of the corridor. Where might new trails and public art and access for kayaking or personal access, public access to the river? So again, putting more greening into Main Street. These are all things that the community might consider to do regardless of an outcome on a hydroelectric facility, right? And then looking towards the south, again, this was one of two options that we drafted up. What might happen in terms of redevelopment for the power plant? And so there's some concepts that were developed there. How might we, again, increase access around the sewer treatment plant, and how might we get access on either side of the river on the southern end around south of the Powell Dam. So again, these are just some other concepts. This was an idea of how we might consider the downtown section around Lake George as a big central park, and how you might think of lots of green space all the way around there. How we might treat Lake George as a water resource with some dredging and aeration facilities and those sorts of things. So then there were some detailed concepts that were pulled together. This one continues with the large body of water, the impoundment, and what might happen with some park space to the north, or in this case, actually, it's to the west, to the top side of this plan. How we might look at a connection with a trail over the railroad trestle, the historic trestles that are there, and some improvements to downtown. This is a concept that could work either with Junction Falls or without that facility being in place, where we might look at some dredging materials being placed to create some islands and some other kinds of park features that are water-oriented, connecting those with trails and those sorts of things, and more sort of green space and even potential floodplain park kinds of ideas. And then this one is, again, back to that idea of a larger central park, just kind of thinking about, well, if there isn't a dam anymore and you've got a lot of land that's no longer in a floodplain, how might you reclaim that, and might it be a more formal urban park instead of a more ecological or green space park? So again, just looking at what the options and some of the ideas might be, right? And then the same thing kind of went with Lake Louise. Again, how we might be continuing it as it is, and using the dam to put a footbridge across. Again, the idea of an environmental education center that could happen that allow people to really embrace and learn from the river. An idea if that facility is removed, if the hydro facility is removed, and we're back to a sort of native watercourse running river, what we might do with bringing some of that land back online for green space, ecological parks, again, environmental learning center idea. Off-river, we looked at ideas for taking the Riverwalk, which right now kind of functions as an alley, and really making that into something much more of a linear public space, where we might have downtown buildings that both face the street and face the river, using public art and other kinds of ideas. An idea for strengthening and kind of redeveloping the streetscape that's there right now, which we understand is going to be, street would come under reconstruction somewhere in the 5 to 10 years from now. So, how we might envision improving the public space, the sidewalks, those sorts of things. So here's a quick sketch kind of looking from the east to the west of the Riverwalk idea. Again, ideas for the power plant and how that might get redeveloped. Could that become commercial mixed-use facility. Might there even be some housing in it? A pottery, shed, artwork being done, businesses operating, restaurants, taking the outdoor parking area and some of that space and turning it into gardens and plazas. So, those are just some of the kind of ideas that we touched on. And then lastly, kind of coming back to where we are in the planning process, this is our sort of planning diagram. It's a little hard to read there, so you'll probably be looking at it in your packet. But, the charrette occurred sort of in that, towards the end of 2017, after we'd done a lot of our analysis work and input from the community and tried to, again, envision options and ideas. Then as we move into 2018, it's really about settling on a scenario and starting to evaluate, what are the best ideas that came out of the charrette or that people talked about that we haven't had time to explore related to the decision that everybody's going to make on the hydro facilities. And then once City Council makes that decision, building that into the final corridor plan and getting that to be a user-friendly, workable document that moves you into the future. So what's next? Again, I think don't need to go into great detail because Kevin already kind of identified this. And Ishmael Martinez from our team is here too as a water resource engineer. So if you've got any questions related to that, he's happy to answer.
I did have a question on the community input.
Sure.
Was that primarily people, ratepayers in River Falls, taxpayers in River Falls, or was there input taken from people that lived in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Woodbury?
Primarily from people in River Falls, although we did run a fairly extensive, and you might remember last year about this time, there was a survey that was posted on the website, and there were hundreds of people who answered that survey, and we were able to then filter out folks who were either from other areas of Wisconsin or, as you say, even across the river, and kind of cordon that information off from folks who are, in the zip code for River Falls. And then as we moved forward, I think 99% of the people who came to the tech talks and spoke, or who were at, even River Falls days, we had a lot of folks from all over the place, right? So we got some more regional input there. So it's really been a kind of a variety. But I think in terms of hands on the plan, especially during the design charrette, that was River Falls residents.
How many people participated in the charrette? Do you have an approximate number?
I don't have a final count from the sign-ins, but if I had to guess, I'd say we probably had about 100 to 125 people come through.